Europe's energy crisis is far from over, but Europe has another big worry to deal with, and that is the upcoming winter, when it's predicted to be extremely cold. How will its citizens deal with not only a high energy cost, but energy rationing? The term heat or eat is no joke when it comes to the European state of affairs on top of inflation. Hi, I'm Karel Vereycken. Welcome to Economic Divide. In this program, we will take a look at Europe's energy crunch. High gas bills, one of the outcomes, Europe to ration energy, something that is now real. Tough winter is projected ahead. Next up, we will take a look at Europe's cost of living crisis. We've covered this before in this program, worth reviewing again when you take a look at things like high inflation and also low purchasing power as a result of high inflation, amongst other prices that is biting into the pocketbook of Europeans. And finally, EU politicians, what are they doing? Well, in essence, they are sacrificing their own citizens. They're not pushing for diplomacy when it comes to the Ukraine conflict. And as a result, an economic crisis has unfolded for them. As the crisis between Russia and the West heats up, fears are growing in Europe of a gloomy winter. There are now concerns that Russia could turn the gas tap off to Europe. Prices are already high in Europe and the UK.
There is potentially a double parallel between Britain today and Britain in 1973, thereabouts, in that the inflation which took off in Britain in 1973 and stayed high for the rest of the decade was the first impulse towards inflation was a combination of domestic forces because of global energy prices.
Households in Germany will have to pay almost 500 euros more a year for gas.
Die Bundesregierung hat deshalb heute entschieden, die Mehrwertsteuer auf Gasverbrauch zeitlich befristet auf 7% abzusenken. Der ermäßigte Mehrwertsteuersatz wird so lange gelten, wie die Gasbeschaffungsumlage erhoben werden wird, also bis zum 31. März 2024.
There is no relief for Europe and its citizens when it comes to their economic state of affairs. They simply can't keep up or do anything about their money losing its value at this point in time. And that is very evident when you take a look at some online posts on this matter. And then with winter coming, things are looking pretty bad for them. Our first online post, winter in Europe may be springtime for Putin. Taking a look at this entry, we go into the source, where it says winter in Europe may be springtime for Putin. Russia's energy war deploys high prices to promote social turmoil and to empower populist parties. Next up, Europe seems to be getting exactly what the US thought Russia was getting, an economic squeeze so bad that it topples leaders. Ouch, that hurts. Then German and French electricity are at record highs of 532 euros per megawatt hour for Germany and 690 euros per megawatt hour for France. Europe on the verge of an energy crisis, and it will be a very cold winter for the region. And then finally, natural gas is being stored and demand is being curbed, but it's far too early to call an end to Europe's fears of a cold, dark winter plagued by blackouts. Now, let's take a look at what this entry says in detail. Welcome to Europe's dark, cold winter. Elements by Julian Lee, in which it says replenishing storage and reducing demand still may not be enough. So obviously all the online posts that we just reviewed show how bad Europe is going to do and their citizens come winter. Okay, let's bring in our guests for this segment of the Q&A. Our first guest is Malachi Steenson. He's a lawyer and political activist. Malachi Steenson, welcome to Economic Divide. Taking a look at Europeans, they are looking at a really tough winter ahead, of which then the news of gas rationing and energy rationing in particular is what they have announced. And this has actually gone into effect. The shortage in energy to have affected deeply, for example, the UK, where electric bills have tripled. When you take a look at rationing, that really has a shocking bell to or ring to it. And of course, the immediate question is, when that happens, how will that affect the economy of countries like Germany and the UK?
Well, I think if we look particularly at Ireland, we're seeing the very same thing where we're seeing, huge increases in both electricity, gas, and oil prices. And I think that the oil companies and the utility companies are using the Ukrainian crisis in order to jack up prices to consumers and to increase profits. I mean, at one hand, they're telling us that the price of these commodities is increasing, yet at the same time as they increase the price to consumers, their profits are going up by huge margins. So it seems to me there's a certain amount of price gouging in the whole business. I think that the West and the EU in particular are using the Ukrainian crisis in order to bring in further controls on population. I mean, again, if you look at Ireland, we're told we're going to have energy blackouts during the next winter. But at the same time, our economic policy is geared towards bringing in, for instance, more data centers, which are huge users of electricity in particular, huge users of water resources. And there's no reluctance to say, well, if we're going to be short of electricity and power, then we shouldn't be bringing in these big consumers.
Okay, let me introduce our next guest. Karel Vereycken joins us. Karel is the VP of the French party by the name of Solidarity and Progress, or Progrès, as they say in French. Karel, welcome to Economic Divide. Europe is forecast to begin this winter with historically low amounts of diesel. And my focus on this question is diesel that powers large parts of the economy in European countries, used for cars, trucks, etc. Now, when you take a look at the way that this actually obviously is one of the components behind the way that the economy and its wheel turn, how will this be supplied if the supplies of diesel are at their lowest this time of the year when it continued from the year 2008?
Well, on the gas situation, there are deals with Azerbaijan, Norway, and Algeria. On the oil, it's probably more complicated because there are all kinds of tricks which are being used by various countries to counter the sanctions. For example, India is buying a lot of Russian oil, which is very cheap with special discounts, like China also. But India eventually could sell it to other partners in other countries, which then in turn can sell it to the US and to Europe. So everything depends to what degree, the police, the media police, and the financial police of the institutions connected to the central banks, will they really impose their policies? But you're absolutely right that diesel is a very clean and cheap energy and efficient energy, and taking it down will only lower the productivity, and then lower productivity means increasing chances of recession, depression, and bankruptcy.
It's time now for our Info News section of the program, where we bring you news with an economic flavor from around the world. Our first item is something to do with kids, the cost of kids. That's right, that has made news. The price of parenthood in the age of inflation. Now, this particular one is for the US, where it costs at least $300,000 per kid to raise them. Now, what have they done to come up with that figure? They have factored in the cost of inflation, where it said that a child costs more than a pretty penny for the average American. That price used to be roughly around $200,000 to $250,000. So obviously there was a huge increase when it comes to the cost of kids and raising them. Next up, something that the EU doesn't want to hear about, it's EU bankruptcies from businesses. More EU firms are facing that bleak situation. According to Eurostat, the number of petitions for insolvency has grown for a fourth consecutive quarter. Bankruptcy declarations has increased by 2.2% in the April to June period for the year 2022. Another blow to the European economy. And the next up, piece of news that came out regarding Canada and Canadian worker abuse, where you have a fight that has ramped up to prevent Canadian companies from abusing these workers abroad. Canadian companies have been accused of being complicit in alleged rights abuses and environmental harms. Now that obviously has to deal with companies that deal with minerals or resources of that nature. And our final look goes to Dubai and the inflation in there. Consumer prices there have rocketed to its highest after years of actual deflation. Maybe you didn't know, but just 3 years ago, Dubai was experiencing the sharpest deflation in the region, peaking at 3.9% annually in February of 2019. So it shows at this point how that has not rebounded, it's gone the opposite way towards inflation. Those were the topics we picked. Hope you liked them. If you have any particular piece of news that you'd like to share with us from where you are at, please do send them to us. Contact information is on your screens now. Time now for an in-depth section of the program. The energy crisis in Europe is real. Many Europeans will not be able to afford their heating bill this winter. And that's going to have severe consequences, unintended ones, for European officials and their countries. Social unrest not that far off. Some have speculated that is what's going to happen. Well, let's take a look at some of the reasons why something like that may occur. Now, here you're going to take a look at the snapshot of electricity prices for the year 2021. Spain and Portugal, 411% increase. I mean, that's a lot, isn't it, for countries to experience that much of an increase. Greece has experienced a 343% increase in their electricity wholesale prices. And also taking a look at our last look here is France, which comes in at 336%. A lot. And also we're looking at other countries that maybe we didn't have time to put here. Last one here, Italy. This has come in at 318%. And this is directly coming from the European Commission in terms of the figures and the increase that you see over here. Now, as energy prices surge while wages remain unchanged, or maybe just a slight increase, some are living from salary to salary based on what has occurred. And they're being forced to actually decide whether to spend their limited funds on keeping the lights on in their homes or filling the fridge. This is where the term heat or eat has become a catchword for Europeans. That's the stark reality that they're facing. All right, next, energy ministers. Well, they had to do something. They've reached a deal on an EU-wide reduction in gas, which is something they came up with 15% across the board. They said this first phase will be voluntary based on coordination or fuel switching, temperature limits, and information campaigns. But we have to wait and see whether that can actually be a blanket application for all European countries. That's key over there. Next up, this is something that's really incredible. Now, they're facing an energy crisis, okay? So what they're going to do, they are actually announced that they're prepared to drive up the cost of everyone's heating bills. How is that going to happen? Well, they're going to secure their supply of natural gas for the upcoming winter. But according to the European Union officials, whatever the world market can pay for a tanker transporting a supercooled form of like fossil fuel across international waters, Europe will be willing to top it. That's right. So whatever price is out there, they said this formally, made the announcement, we're going to pay a higher price. So there you have it. You have the citizens of these countries that are going to pay higher for that. Let's bring back Malachi Stinson, who's a lawyer and political activist, to see what he thinks about this. Malachi Stinson, welcome back. The EU has agreed to ration gas. That's one of the things that it said it will do. But some countries obviously have put up a fight because every country has its own particular needs when it comes to energy. And of course, these energy sanctions against Russia are biting their economies. How fragile is this unity against Russia, do you think, at this point, as the economies are tanking and people are suffering?
At the same time, we're telling people, because of climate change and the agenda that they're using there to control people, we're saying that you must switch to electric cars. And at the same time, we're telling people, well, you're going to have electrical shortages. So you're not going to be able to charge your car. So you're going to be, just like they used COVID to ensure that people were brought under a communist type control in their countries, where they were afraid to go out the doors, where they were told, that Armageddon was coming and the world was about to end. We're told the same with climate change. And, as Michael O'Leary, the CEO of Ryanair, said the other day, that these people are telling us, for instance, what the temperature would be in 100 years, and they can't tell us what next Tuesday's weather will be like. So there seems to me to be a whole agenda being pursued, which is not in the interest of the ordinary consumer, and it's not in the interest of the ordinary member of the public. It's a policy that's being pursued, on one hand, to create and move capital into fewer and fewer hands, and also at the same time to move power into this European federal state almost, and into the powers of unelected bureaucrats.
Okay, let's see what Karel Vereycken thinks. He's the VP of the French party, Solidarity and Progress, who rejoins us. Karel, welcome back. A month ago, we saw how Europe was facing an energy rationing scheme, which it says it's going to enact as the tough winter, which has been predicted is going to be tough, is looming. You're looking at the shortage that has really catapulted gas prices and energy prices into a whole nother level, like in the UK, where it's tripled. Germany is also affected very severely. What effects will this rationing, when it really goes into full-fledged execution, have on the economy of these countries?
Well, it's a fast trip to disaster, because there is an alignment of several planets which are predicting that this will lead us to total collapse. First of all, for the European economy, it means losing the market in Russia, which for some factors in some areas is very important. Secondly, we're losing the arrival of raw materials for the production. Three, the higher cost of energy, because will bring down productivity. The model of the reconstruction of Europe after the war is to have cheap energy and invested in highly productive industry and agriculture. For example, people in Germany talk about the end of the German model, because they will not have the cheap energy to build machines they can export and sell for high prices. Then on top of this, we have the drought, which is slowing down our nuclear power plants, which cannot be cooled, notably in France, but also it is impacting transport, like the Danube and the Rhine River. The Rhine is now below 40 centimeters, which means a lot of shipping inland waterways cannot really function.
The industrial Northwest Europe is likely to face diesel shortages this winter. Diesel power covers large parts of the economy. Diesel shortages, along with falling levels of heating oil, could further weaken the economy and to prompt more protests across the continent. Gas rationings and possible shutdowns could potentially trigger social unrest and dissatisfaction among the poorer sections of European societies.
Ist der politische Fehler, sich abhängig gemacht zu haben von einem Potentaten, der Menschen und Bürger und Völkerrechte mit den Füßen tritt, indem sie nichts wert sind. Und sich davon zu befreien und damit wieder Souveränität im Außen und auch Rechte politischen Handelns zu gewinnen, lohnt, meine ich, die gesamte Kraftanstrengung dieser Legislatur.
Strikes have already erupted in several countries, including the UK, Belgium, and Spain. Governments are aware that people are struggling, and they know that things will get worse in the coming months.
I think our problem now is a lack of knowledge we don't have anybody around in politics who can remember what it was like with inflation. Certainly not in office, and indeed many of them not at all, because this is quite a young generation of politicians we have now. So I think there's a danger in possibly in the other direction. The people are slightly lost.
We have told you about Europe's energy problem, but perhaps no country in Europe is facing an energy crisis like Germany. Let us count the reason why. The scale of the problem for Germany is so big that this headline reads a doomsday scenario. According to Bloomberg, Germany is at a risk of deindustrialization. It states that soaring power prices may trigger an exodus of factories from the country. Prices for gas and electricity in Germany have reportedly more than doubled in the past 2 months. There's another point that is not covered when it comes to Germany, and that is how they have moved to green energy from a long time ago under a program called Energiewende. Energiewende gained legislative support in 2010, and Germany spent over 202 billion euros on renewable energy projects from 2013 to 2020. Since 2010, the share of German electricity generation that has come from solar and wind power has risen from 8% to 31%. Now Germany may reopen its coal plants that it had shut down. They have no choice in order to safeguard their economy and national security. Don't forget, coal is the dirtiest source of electricity. Nevertheless, Germany has told its citizens that they have to face the stark truth when it comes to energy use. The German government has urged its citizens to lower energy use. They required citizens to turn down their air conditioners and use less hot water.
Ich denke, es ist eine gute Idee, weil wir eine Energiekrise haben, die gemeinschaftlich gelöst werden muss. Und da müssen wir alle anpacken. Und wenn es da um so relativ irrelevante Sachen wie die Anstrahlung von Gebäuden geht, kann man da doch easy anpacken.
Ich finde das eigentlich ganz gut. Also da so als Zeichen, dass die Stadt ein bisschen Energie sparen möchte. Ich weiß nicht genau, wie viel das einspart, aber wie gesagt, als Zeichen finde ich es nicht schlecht, sich für die Leute dass man irgendwo ein bisschen Energie sparen kann, gerade in den heutigen Zeiten.
Ich denke, jeder kann so ein bisschen sparen und irgendwie dazu beitragen, dass wir die gesellschaftlichen Probleme gemeinsam lösen.
Let's end this segment by bringing up another point that is the following. What are the safest and cleanest sources of energy? Fossil fuels are the dirtiest and most dangerous energy sources, while nuclear and modern renewable energy sources are vastly safer and cleaner. The differences are huge. So it is quite hypocritical of Western governments to tell Iran to stop its civilian use of nuclear energy. That does it for this segment. Hope you found it useful. Any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to send them to us and get in touch with us. Contact info is on your screens now.
When European countries began confronting Russia after Russia's special military operation against Ukraine, did they really know what they were getting themselves into? I mean, first of all, let's be clear, I'm not trying to justify the war or the death of civilians. But as the war dragged on, did the Europeans really want to continue down this path, one in which they are now facing things like lack of food, inflation, or high energy costs? Even now, do they want a political solution for the sake of at least not ruining their economies, let alone their citizens? Or are they following the US diktats while risking a potential either third world war or worse yet, a nuclear catastrophe? These are key questions that the European officials need to deal with. We'll find out hopefully sooner than later what they decide. That does it for this edition of the program. It was great having you with us. As usual, we would love to hear from you, comments, questions, critiques, even better. Send them to us. Contact information is behind me. From me, Karel Vereycken and team, looking forward to seeing you next week.